This kennel club comes periodically to the sprawling estate of Hyder and Erica Bakay to talk and train their Rottweilers. Pat Murray of New Jersey is their guest trainer.
Stand still. Deal? Nope.
Okay, my name is Hyder Bakay, and my wife and I have been into dogs for about 25 years. Initially with German Shepherds, and in the last 13, 14 years with Rottweilers.
The Rottweiler descended from powerful dogs that drove and guarded the cattle that accompanied the Roman army in its march across Europe. Some of these dogs were left behind to guard outposts along the route. One such point was in the area of Wattenberg, Germany. Here, the Mastiff-type dogs were bred with local herding dogs to create a strong, trustworthy breed that came to be known as the butcher's dog of Rottweiler. Because the dog guarded the butcher's money when the pair was en route to the cattle sales and drove the livestock home on the return trip.
It is estimated that around 1937, the first registered Rottweiler arrived to the States, but there were rumors that there was a Rottweiler earlier in the 1920s, and they've had some photographs of it, you know, but they don't know who it was, and not enough information to identify it. But the breed really didn't catch on until I would say the 70s in a big way, late 70s actually. But by the 1960s, you had about a half a dozen breeders in this country who I would call reputable breeders, who actually, I would say, are responsible for the initial wave of Rottweilers in this country.
Yes.
The male dogs are supposed to be anywhere between 24 and 27 inches tall, with definite masculine appearance, good top lines, dark eyes, dark mouth pigmentation, good rust color, even though the AKC accepts tan, black and tan. Females go anywhere from 22 to 25 inches. Weight, you know, in both male and female is supposed to be proportionate. Body length, body height is supposed to be proportionate, so you have a nice balance. Balanced looking dog, neither too long nor too tall. It's acceptable to put up a larger dog in AKC as long as, again, the balance is there, the harmony is there. Again, neither too long nor too tall, too leggy, too heavy in body. Bone supposed to fit the body type. Good bone, they don't like in Rottweilers, they prefer a medium to a heavy bone dog, as opposed to a Doberman who's, you know, very light-boned. Good top lines, good stops, again, good ear sets. That's mainly what's called for in the standard, in the anatomy of the Rottweiler.
Okay. Tell us about what type of environment the breed needs.
Well, we've lived in the city with our dogs, and we found that they adjusted very well to our city life. When we both worked and had to leave the dogs at home all day long, they were fine with us as long as we came home and spent time running around with them, playing with them. They do require, you know, some of that. They're not total house dogs where you can just leave them, ignore them, like a bloodhound perhaps, who's happy to just lie around all day, all night. They do require some exercise, but they're content to be at home as long as they know what their routine is going to be. That does include some amount of exercise. But we've had the opportunity to move out to New Jersey with them in the last 7 or 8 years, and they excel outside. They just love being outdoors, running around. They're happier when they're, constantly out doing stuff, even if it's just to watch other things happening around them. When they're in the house, they're basically deadheads. And they can make good house dogs, good apartment dogs, but they do need some form of exercise. The more, the better for them.
No, the last one will be okay, boy. Down. He's coming like a shepherd now.
What type of care and maintenance does the breed need related to grooming, exercise, etc.?
Well, as far as grooming, the Rottweiler is probably one of the least, one of the dogs that needs least grooming of any dogs that I know. Their coats are fairly short, easily kept clean. They have very little as far as allergy type problems or hair type problems, and very rarely do you see one that really needs any additional medicinal care. And as far as grooming, before we take them to a show, we usually give them a bath a day before that and just rinse them out, and they're fine. There's no excessive grooming necessary. The Rottweiler is actually a fairly well-rounded dog in terms of accepting environment. I would tend to guess that in very hot tropical climates, they do take a little more of a beating, and their lifespan is a little shorter. So I would guess that that's the least favorable. And of course, in very, very northern climates, if it's well into the sub-zeros, they probably don't take as well there either. So anything in between, they do rather well. They're very adaptable.
What are some of the inherent health problems of the Rottweiler?
Hip dysplasia, of course, is one of the major problems. The dog is a very large dog, and as with most large dogs, you have to watch the inherent breeding of a Rottweiler, because we do have a problem with hip dysplasia. Also, he's been overbred to such an extent and in such a way that the quality control vis-a-vis the OFA, which is the organization which classifies or registers dogs with good hips, could be better controlled by placing some kind of identification, either a microchip or a tattoo, and verifying that the dog you're x-raying is actually the dog that's being tested. And because we don't have that, in the last 20 years that I know, the percentages of OFA versus the percentages of dogs being bred have not dropped any. And one is to think that either it isn't genetic or there's a whole lot of cheating, and it could be a combination of the two, and that's what I suspect.
If you open up any newspaper today in any large city in America, you'll see that there's a number of Rottweilers for sale. The prices on some of these dogs is very low. Is there any problem with purchasing a Rottweiler like this?
Well, it's a perfect example of cheap being expensive. $100 to $300, $400, $500 Rottweiler is a dog that's been bred with no before thought. There's been no studying as to genetics. There's been no care as to the background of its sire or dam. There's very little, if any, care in not only the initial thought of who you put together, but also once the puppy is whelped, in the stability of their early lives. It is basically an exercise of producing puppies for sale, and cutting costs would be breeding to either the dog next door or to an inferior dog, and having puppies in the backyard and giving no work to them whatsoever. That's the only way to maintain those type of prices.
My name is Vincent Smith, and I've been a Rottweiler enthusiast, and I guess I would like to call myself a purist for about 7 years. And along with that came Bandit. I started when I was actually living in Germany, where the breed is from, about in 1989 when I was in the Air Force. Since I came from, I guess, the old school by starting in Germany with Bandit von Excalibur, which is Schützen 3, I came up through a different, I guess, a mode. And that mode is where he had to get a breed test, and he had to have a hip test, and he was actually registered through people from Germany who actually came out and inspected his litter to make sure the quality was there. Whereas with the AKC, you don't have that. And since I've been in America, I don't believe in the AKC. I've never shown him in the AKC. I never will show him. And I say the reason I mention that I'm a purist, I'm one of those who has a stud dog who's done very well in America, but I won't breed him to just any bitch who does have AKC registration papers, because all that means is she's a Rottweiler. But just being a Rottweiler isn't enough to actually maintain the breed, and that's something that I'm really interested in. And what they have now is a club called the ARV, which is the American Rottweiler Marine, and they also have the United States Rottweiler Club. And what they do is they now have the same standards by which they go by in Germany, and that's to have a breed test. And this breed test is for the males and for the females. And what this does is make sure the male has a stable temperament, make sure the female has a stable temperament, make sure they fall within the height requirements, pigmentation of the mouth, pigmentation of the color. So overall, what it does is maintains the breed that we're very involved with.
The AKC is basically a registration organization. Whatever its initial charter might have been, right now, its only purpose seems to be to make money. It has absolutely no program for maintaining the quality of any of its breeds. As a matter of fact, whenever a breed gains in popularity, because of the whole AKC organizational program, being registry, being showing, obedience, and what have you, what it has done is it does not pursue excellence. It does not pursue quality. It pursues quantity, and it not only does not discourage, but in some ways you might say they encourage puppy mills, pet factories.
My name's Pat Murray. I've been involved in dog training for the past 10 years, for the past 5 years professionally. I'm involved with several different breeds of dogs, Rottweilers, Belgian Malinois, Amstaffs, as well as German Shepherds.
Pat, can you tell us a little bit about the trainability of the Rottweiler and some of its training characteristics?
Dog, as an overall view, adjusts well basically to all situations. It's a well-balanced dog, accepts training very easily. It's a little bit more on the stubborn side in comparison to some of the other working breeds, but is definitely an excellent candidate for work.
Okay,
I've heard some people say Rottweilers don't take kindly to training to the point where they become a spiteful dog if things don't go quite the way that they think it should be going.
It depends on the direction of your training program. The training program for a dog such as a Rottweiler, it definitely has to be a non-confrontational one due to the fact that a Rottweiler genetically is a little bit more on the defensive side. It's very strong in temperament, and they don't take kindly to correction, so it has to be very careful in the training is that the handler doesn't become the source of conflict to the dog. This is why a lot of times in the paper you see people have problems with Rottweilers and dog turns on handler and so on and so forth. It's not that it's a bad dog, it's just a dog that's very correct, has a lot of temperament, and doesn't take kindly to the training program which he's been entered into. The training program that a Rottweiler, you know, responds best to is one that's conducive where the handler is the outlet of conflict instead of the source of the conflict.
What are some of the different methods that are used for training personal protection dogs?
Well, basically there are different ways to train dogs. You have the old school, which basically they teach the dog reactive aggression, where the dog responds to he's responding to how the man's interacting with him. In other words, he's responding defensively because he doesn't want the man to inflict any pain or so on and so forth to him. That's really not the ideal way to train a personal protection dog. You want to teach a personal protection dog active aggression, where the dog is confident, he works confidently, he understands his job, he knows when it's appropriate and not appropriate to respond that way.
Down and struggle.
Good boy.
Yes. This is a wrecking machine here. House! House! Don't correct him, just command him. He knows the work.
Unfortunately, what people have become enamored with is not the dog itself, but is what the dog has projected. And basically what the dog has projected is the myth of the dog is not the dog. Films like The Omen and some other French films have created an image of the Rottweiler that is really not accurate. He's not a devil dog. He's not a nasty dog. And basically, it takes a nasty person to create a nasty dog. And that goes not only for the Rottweiler, but for all the breeds. And because of this projected image, we're getting people that are looking for Rottweilers who not only shouldn't have Rottweilers, in my opinion, they shouldn't have any dogs. Unfortunately, if the AKC worked closer with the breeders, rather than the handlers and the judges, I think that all breeds would be better off for it. And I think we, as a country, would have dogs that are not the laughingstock of the rest of the world. And but it's very, very difficult to upset a political system that has worked very well, where there's people that are making money at this and whose egos are being fed.
Hold it up high. Can't get no higher than that, Frank.
That's a multiple V.
Yes. Good boy. Oh! Oh! Run him in a circle. Calm him down.
We'd like to thank trainer Pat Murray, Frank Deline, Vince Smith, and Heider and Erica Bakay for their help in this breed segment.
Stand still.